Hey guys, it's Ken with Movie for Guys. We're reviewing this is a movie that I really was looking forward to checking out, and that of course is the sequel to Pacific Rim, that being Pacific Rim Uprising. And what Pacific Rim Uprising is essentially about is we pick up about 10 years after the events of the first movie. As we know, the humans have won the war, basically, and we focus on Idris Elba's character, Pentecost, his son, Jake, who basically is kind of in the middle of this whole thing where there are these recruits that are basically taken to prepare for the inevitable return of the kaiju, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Pacific Rim Uprising in general, I was really looking forward to this movie. I thought this just looked like a really fun movie that, maybe doesn't have the most well-realized characters, but does have some fun action, does have some enjoyable performances, and that's really what the first movie was. It had characters that weren't really that well-written, but it did have good performances in there. It had some really entertaining action scenes, and that's really all I wanted this movie to be. Do we really need the sequel? No, but I was at least on board for it, and honestly, after watching this movie, I could not be more disappointed, honestly. Pacific Rim Uprising is easily one of the laziest, uninspired, unnecessary sequels I have seen in a very long time. That really does strip away a lot of what made the first one so great, but we're gonna get into right now, starting off with the cast. And that is one thing I will give this movie. The cast, I'm very 50-50 with, but the ones that I liked, I really did like. Especially our main star here, John Boyega, who I think after this movie has really inserted himself as a bona fide star. I mean, this movie truly proves that his stint in Star Wars was not just a fluke. I mean, he really is a great actor, and he brings a lot to this role. You know, when this character, we'll get to the character a little bit later, but this is a character that is dealing with a lot of things. I mean, of course, he is, the son of Idris Elba's character, and there's a lot of pressure to be as loyal as he was, and, be as beneficial as he was, and to care about people as much and be as responsible. So he really is kind of grappling with that, and I really did like seeing him go through that. There isn't a lot with this character in general. We'll get to that when it comes to the writing, but what there is, Boyega really does do a great job with. He's very charming, he's very likable, and I think in general, he definitely has a future after this for sure. I really did like seeing him in this movie, and if anything, I do recommend seeing this movie just for Boyega's performance, because he really does do a great job of commanding this film overall. Scott Eastwood is pretty much the opposite here, though. I really was not a fan of his character. Not just his character, though, but he, for me, is the Charlie Hunnam of this movie. But at least with Charlie Hunnam, he wasn't as wooden and bland as Eastwood really is, because that really is what he is here. He's very bland, he's very wooden, there's not really much depth given to him in general, and I don't know why we keep trying to make Scott Eastwood this huge action star, because it's clear he's not that. The only thing I've really liked Scott Eastwood in, honestly, is Fate of the Furious, and the reason why I liked him in that is because he wasn't this huge character. Sure, he was in the movie for a large portion, but he was not one of the, big characters. He wasn't at the center of everything, and I think this movie proves that when you try to put him in that kind of role, he's just not equipped to do that, and I don't think he is the right kind of actor. He's much better as a background actor, and I really did not like him in this movie. I thought was very wooden here. Someone I did really like, though, is Cailee Spaeny as the character of Amara. Now, the character we'll get to a little bit later, but I really saw a lot of potential in her. I really did like her character, what she's going through. She's kind of someone who is preparing for the inevitable return of the kaiju. She has a lot of experience about Jaegers, and I really like getting into that. And some of the best scenes in this movie are just the scenes between her and Jake. I thought they had very good chemistry overall. Boyega really does work as sort of like this brotherly figure for her, and I thought their relationship was honestly quite sweet, and I think she really did a good job here. There are parts of this movie where she can get a bit annoying, but Spaeny was so good that it never really was degrading to me. It never really annoyed me or anything. I thought that honestly she was just very fun in the role. I really did like her, and I think she really does have a future after this. She really was pretty great here. However, easily the weakest part of this movie, unfortunately, is Charlie Day, because let's talk about him. The first movie, I really liked him. I thought that he had a lot of comedy, and sure, they did use him a lot, but it was to a point where you could see that there was a human beneath this guy. You know, he was someone who was fascinated with the kaiju. He wanted to know how to take them down, you know, find their weakness and things like that. And you liked him in that sense. He was good for that portion of the film. Here, though, oh no, this is the complete opposite of what we got from the first movie. Not only is he incredibly annoying here, but the film really doesn't know when to quit. I mean, they overuse this character so much to the point where you just don't want to see him anymore. And the direction he goes in this movie is laughably bad. It really is. I mean, it is hysterical what they end up doing, but it's awful. It really is awful, and I don't know why they took him in this direction. And honestly, I don't really know why they brought him back in this movie. I don't think he really needed to be here. I think you could have cut his character out, and I don't think anyone would have cared. He really feels very out of place this movie. There are really a lot of points where he sticks out like a sore thumb, and it's a shame because I thought he was one of the bright spots of the first movie, and here they basically took every interesting and, you know, sort of compelling and likable element of his character and stripped it away completely and made something that was a lot less pleasant and honestly really embarrassing to watch. The rest of the cast here, they do what they need to do for the most part. Rinko Kikuchi, once again, I did like in this movie. I really liked Mako in the first movie, and she, once again, here, I thought was really good. Gorman, you know, he's back here. He's pretty good as well. All the other characters, you know, they're there. Nothing really to say about them, but they play the parts they need to play. Jing I actually did like. I saw her in The Great Wall, and I definitely saw a lot in her in that movie, and she does a good job here. Nothing amazing, but I did think everyone did a pretty good job here for the most part. Besides those performances I said that were pretty bad, and that's really all I have to say. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because here's where we get to easily my biggest problems with this movie. First of all, the first movie, as we know, was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and there was a lot of style in that movie. He had a very distinctive look and feel to it. It felt like it was something where it knew it wasn't the most serious thing ever, and it just tried to be a fun action movie, and I think that's one of the reasons why it worked. Pacific Rim Uprising is the complete opposite. This movie thinks it's basically Star Wars. It really does. I mean, it's one of those things where they're trying to deepen the layers and they're trying to deepen the mythology, and the tone is so all over the place. There are times in this movie where they try to play a lot of things for comedy, and almost everything falls flat. The only stuff that really got laughs out of me was stuff that, like, Cailee Spaeny said, but other than that, I rarely laughed in this movie, and if I did, it wasn't at stuff that was supposed to be funny. The stuff that is supposed to be serious is some of the stuff I actually laughed at, particularly stuff involving Charlie Day's character. I shouldn't have been laughing, but I didn't. I wasn't alone. Most of my theater was laughing along with me, because it really is ridiculous what they end up doing with him. But in general, I just thought the tone was very meshed, honestly. It did not really go together. It was very disjointed. I really couldn't figure out what they were trying to do. Are they trying to focus more on, are they trying to make this more of a character-driven movie, or are they trying to make this more of, mythology? It did not really have a distinctive tone to me, and I just think the directing was very all over the place in that way. I could not tell what this movie really wanted to be. The writing easily is the biggest problem here, because the problem with this movie in general is that, one, it feels very unnecessary. It really does. I mean, there isn't really much going on in this story. They've already won the war. It doesn't really feel like there's much more of a story to tell, yet we still have these recruits that are gearing up for the return of the kaiju. The thing that doesn't make sense is in the beginning of the movie, John Boyega's character, feels like they're done. Like, there's no reason why they need to continue. So, eventually, he starts to get on board with the idea, but it's just not developed very well. I could not really tell what they were trying to do here. This movie is very similar to Cloverfield Paradox, you know, that Netflix movie that just came out, in the sense where it tries to deepen the layers of the mythology, and it tries to go more in depth, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And especially something like this, Pacific Rim is not something that you really need to deepen. It's very paint by numbers, and I think that's what it needs to be. I recognize that the first movie didn't have the deepest characters. You know, I'm completely fine with that. I do think that it held the movie back a little bit, but it was enjoyably mediocre. Like I said, it's a film that I can watch, and no, it's not the greatest thing ever, but the action sequences are very well done. This movie, without spoiling anything, the action sequences don't really happen until the third act. The first two acts of this movie are largely very dull, and there's not really a lot going on here. The characters, forget about it. There's really nothing to them. I mean, Jake, when they try to make attempts to his character, it does somewhat work, but he doesn't really go through any sort of arc. He ends the movie in the same place that he started it. He's not really someone that I necessarily root for. He often makes these remarks about how handsome and sexy he is. Like, he literally will say, I'm sexy, I'm handsome, and he'll say that about Scott Eastwood's character, and it's just, it's like, no, why are we doing this? Like, what is the point of this? Is this supposed to be funny? Is this supposed to be like a character arc? It didn't make any sense why they were going in that direction with him. And like I said, I think what his storyline should have been is him trying to kind of pick up where his father left off. Like, I think that should have been his arc in the movie, and they just didn't really do anything with that. And it's very similar to the first movie, where the most interesting stuff about his character, they don't really do a lot with. There's one scene between him and Amara that I did think was very well done, but other than that, it's not really, they don't really do much with it, and there's not a lot of development. And to me, that should have been the key relation of this movie, is the relation between him and Amara, because when they have scenes together, it is actually very well handled. I thought the relation was actually very endearing. You could tell that Amara was someone who had a lot of extensive knowledge about the kaiju and about the Jaegers, and I like getting into that. But again, the film just does not know what to do with them, and, you know, puts them in this setting. You think it's going to be this one thing, and it's just not. And the recruits in general could not be more one-dimensional, honestly. There's really nothing to them, and you really don't care about their characters at all. They're really not good here. The film spends so much time on this rivalry between Jake and Scott Eastwood's character, and it's just not interesting. It's really not. It reminded me a lot of the guy who was jealous of Raleigh in the first movie, but the difference is here, it's at the forefront. The first movie was more of the romance between Raleigh and Mako. That was more of the big relation in that movie. Here, that whole rivalry is at the forefront, and it's so boring and uninteresting. And it's not just because of Scott Eastwood, it's just, it's not an interesting story in general, and I really was not into it. Also, as much as I did like Amara's character, her whole arc in this movie is basically the exact same thing as what Mako went through in the first movie. Without getting into it, as we know, Mako, if you can kind of connect the dots as to what I'm saying, think of what Mako's main storyline was and, like, the main thing she was going through. It is basically the same exact thing that Amara's going through here, and maybe there are a few key differences here and there, but other than that, there really is nothing different when it comes to their characters, and I was really disappointed because, again, I see a lot in Cailee Spaeny, and she did add a lot to the role, but I just couldn't feel that. I couldn't help the feeling, but it was very rinse and repeat. It did not feel different at all, and really did not work for me. A lot of people have compared this movie to Kingsman: The Golden Circle, and I would say that is very similar. The difference is I wasn't nearly as hyped for this movie as I was for Kingsman 2. Kingsman 2 is my most anticipated movies of the year last year. But there is a huge similarity, especially when it comes to a certain death. Similar to Kingsman: The Golden Circle, this film randomly, basically just out of nowhere, unceremoniously kills off this one character. And it was so random and out of nowhere to the point where when they say this character was dead, it was like, oh, they're dead. Okay. Like that shouldn't be my reaction. I should feel something, especially considering the character that they kill, I actually did care a great amount for, honestly. I actually did care a great deal of, empathy for, and the fact that they just killed off this character, I just didn't really understand it. I really did not understand why they had to do that. Once again, similar to Kingsman, it doesn't really do anything to the story whatsoever. It's brought up like once or twice, and then they just kind of drop it, and I don't even know why they went in that direction. It's so weird, it's out of place, and it just seemed like it was there because they didn't really have much to do with the story in general. Like I said, everything going on with Charlie Day's character in this movie is a complete mess. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and I don't even want to get into what they do with him because you just gotta see the movie for yourself. It's hilariously bad, really. I can't believe they took him in that direction, that they actually thought this was a good idea, because it's awful. It's really dumb. I don't know what they were thinking, and I can't believe they actually took his character in that direction. If you watch him in the first movie, there's no way you're going to think that that guy ends up being the guy where we are stuck with in this movie. It just does not feel like the same character, and I don't really know what they did here, but it's pretty bad. It really is. The writing's just a mess in general. It really is. It's a complete mess. I don't really know how else to describe it. That's everything I need to when it comes to writing. Cinematography, it's still really good here. That is one of the things I will give this movie. When there is action here, it is well done. I did enjoy the action. However, the third act, it becomes very overabundant, and you can tell that they really were relying on the action a lot. It felt like they were holding back, that they're like, oh, just you wait, we got something planned in the third act, and the third act, it goes into full Transformers 3 territory, where like the last 40 minutes are just full-on action, and it's like non-stop, and there's barely a second to breathe, and that would have been fine if the whole movie was like that, but it just felt like they were doing that because they were saving it up, and they use it so much where it becomes kind of boring, honestly, especially this one specific threat they have at the end of the movie. I should be getting chills. I should be on the edge of my seat, but I honestly was just like, can we wrap this up already? It was just going on for way too long, and it just didn't really seem like it was going to end, and eventually it did, but it just went on for way too long. And again, I attribute it to the fact that the action was just very sporadic up until the third act, and I think if they would have spread it out, it would have been a lot more evenly paced, and unfortunately it just wasn't. The kaiju, the Jaggers, they still do look pretty good. They're appealing to watch overall, and I do think that the action was well done here overall. Particularly one scene done at night involving an explosion. If you guys have seen it in the trailer, that scene I actually really did like. I did think that was a really good action scene overall. Even though that scene is actually the turning point of Charlie Day's character, is actually when that happens, but I actually really did like that scene. The score, once again, I really do like the score for these movies. It's epic. It's really puts you into the sci-fi feel of it all, and I really do enjoy the score. The editing, like I said, is all over the place. It's such a messy movie. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Doesn't want to expand the mythology. Doesn't want to focus more on the characters. Doesn't want to do less action. Is it trying to deepen, what's really going on here? It does not know what it wants to be. It's so messy, and just in general, it really doesn't work. Guys, Pacific Rim Uprising is really bad. It really is. I was not a fan of this movie, honestly. It has some competent performances. It does have some scenes that I did enjoy, but overall, I just got out of this movie thinking, what was the point? And unfortunately, this isn't it, because the end of the movie, they do set it up for a sequel. It's so lazy and dumb, and I don't know why they're making this into a franchise. There was no reason for this series to be a franchise. Just leave it at the first movie, and I would have been completely fine with that. It's a solid action flick. The action stuff that's there is very well done. Here, it just feels tiring. It really does. It feels tiring. It feels overabundant. It feels lost and confused. And it's just a shell of what the first movie was. And again, mind you, I was not a huge fan of the first movie, but I will take that any day over what we got here. What we got here just feels so lazy and uninspired and just so messy and just did not need to happen. And I don't know why they really made this movie, honestly, other than the fact that they know they're going to do really well overseas. Other than that, I don't know why they really made this. Unfortunately, while I was hoping this would just be a really fun movie, I am going to give Pacific Rim Uprising overall a D+. Easily one of the biggest misfires of the entire year, guys. I honestly can't believe how terrible this movie really did turn out, but yeah, it's really not good, honestly. I would not recommend it. There weren't many people in my theater, so I don't think this movie's going to do that well in general, but we'll have to see. I don't think it's going to do very well, but either way, guys, in my review, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have seen this movie, let me know what you guys thought of it overall. Left your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.